What is going on, guys? I am Bobby Wailord, and I am here with another deck profile. And this is a deck profile of my Gengar EX, Wailord EX deck. And I will be playing this exact deck list at Nationals. So if you happen to be watching this deck, this deck profile, I should say, you will be seeing it during the Nationals tournament or later. I will be uploading it, I will be releasing it during Nationals to prevent people from playing the exact same deck that I am playing, although I do not believe that my deck will be very popular at Nationals, although I think it will do fairly well. And I will also do a recap of Nationals with how well I do. So, to start off our deck, we have 4 Gengar EX. This is pretty staple. Gengar EX, it has Night Attack that does, you put 3 damage counters on any of your opponent's Pokemon, and Dark Corridor does 60. It poisons the opponent's active Pokemon, and this Pokemon gets switched out with one of your bench Pokemon. And so that creates kind of a cool option that we can play with, and people have switched into many things. They've switched into Wobbuffet. Trevenant's a really popular switch, and I had played with Trevenant before, but I decided that we can go with Wailord. Wailord doesn't have anything special except that huge HP, 250 HP. So the ability allows it to, whenever there's an energy attached to it, it removes all special conditions from it, and its attack is absolutely horrible. It does 120, it's called High Breaching, and it puts a Wailord to asleep. So nothing great about Wailord besides that HP, and a very high retreat cost of 4. But because this deck wouldn't work very well by itself, we also run a 3-3 Garbodor line. And I'm pretty sure everyone knows what Garbodor does, but just as a recap, for anyone who does not know, if Garbodor has a tool attached to it, any Pokemon that has abilities anywhere in the field, on the field in the deck or the discard pile, has no abilities. So this card completely locks out every single ability, or not in the deck, excuse me. It locks out any abilities that are in the hand, on the field currently, or in the discard pile. So Execute doesn't do anything. Wailord's ability, for example, would get canceled out, and Genesect's ability would get canceled out. Red Signal. So a lot of things get canceled out, and that's just our straight Pokemon lineup. It's a very simple lineup. My deck runs very quickly, so it's more of a speed build, if you wanted to say that. Don't run very many techs, actually no techs at all. And that is our Pokemon lineup. For our supporter lineup, we run 4 Juniper. Yep, still rocking out the Juniper. I'm going to wait until I can't run Juniper anymore. Pretty simple. It's 4 Juniper. Every deck runs it. I mean, it's kind of just a staple. We run 3N. Another staple. I run 3 of them. We run 1 Chorus because my bench gets set up pretty quickly, and I think every deck should at least run 1 Chorus, just because, I mean, with Skyfield, just the idea that you could be drawing like 16 cards at a time is just crazy. We run 1 Lysander. I wanted to get this number to 2, but I had troubles trying to fit cards in there, so I dropped a Lysander and just 1 Style. So search for a card. That's our supporter lineup. And for our trainer lineup, our ace spec is Computer Search. Pretty much every deck runs Computer Search. It's pretty simple. Just discard any 2 cards in your hand and search your deck for any card that you want. Probably the best ace spec for any deck. Some decks will be better with other ace specs, but for the most part, Computer Search is the best for any deck. We run 2 Bicycle for kind of speedy. I don't like Acrobike at all, especially because my deck doesn't even use any cards from the discard pile. It doesn't get anything back. Once it's in the discard pile, it stays there unless it's a supporter, which I VS Seeker for, and I have 2 of those. So That's also there. And because we run Garbodor, we have to have some tools in this deck. And we run 8 of them. So, the one that pretty much every single deck that runs Garbodor has runs 4 Floatstone, which gives any Pokemon that's attached to it free retreat. So we run a decent amount of that, and we also have to run it attached to Wailord, because Wailord needs that Floatstone attached to it so it can free retreat. We also run 4 Muscle Band, because Gengar's damage output isn't a lot, but if it has a Muscle Band attached to it, it can do 2-hit knockouts, which is decent, because it's a slower deck, but it also slows down the opponent as well, so it doesn't have to move that quick. We run 3 Ultra Ball. Went for 3 instead of 2, some decks run 2, but getting those Garbodors out on turn 2 or turn 3 is very important for this deck. And because Wailord has 250 HP, and we won't be ever attaching any energy to Wailord for pretty much the entire game, I've decided that we'll run 3 Max Potion. And this is, for anyone who doesn't know, Max Potion heals all damage from one of your Pokemon, and to do so, you have to discard all energy attached to that Pokemon. But because Wailord will never have any energy attached to it, unless we have to retreat, which would be absolutely horrible, all the damage is removed for free, pretty much, with Max Potion. So, Gengar can constantly switch into Wailord. Most Pokemon can hit Wailord in a 3-hit knockout, which is quite bad. But Wailord has 250 HP, and just the next turn, if they have 2 hits on Wailord, just Max Potion it, and all of their work is now gone. But because Starling Megaphone is, at least every single deck usually runs at least 1 Starling Megaphone, and we run a crap ton of tools, and my deck relies on it very highly. We also run 2 Escape Rope and a Switch. So a lot of people may be surprised to see why I just didn't run 3 straight Switch or 2 Switch and 1 Escape Rope. I decided to run 2 Escape Rope and 1 Switch because in some situations, Escape Rope can be used as a Lysander, especially in my deck, because I'm constantly using Float Stones, so it doesn't have as much of an effect on my deck as it would someone else's maybe. So that's why I decided to go with that. We play 1 Startling Megaphone. Again, pretty much every single deck uses it. And we also run 3 Burbank, because with Shaman in the format, hitting 110 is now pretty good for Gengar. And if Gengar has a Muscle Band attached to it and Burbank is in play, it can hit 110 if you count the damage from poison. And that is our trainer lineup. A lot of trainers in this deck. So for the energy, we run 4 double colorless energy, as Gengar's attack costs 1 psychic and 2 double colorless, or 2 colorless, excuse me. So it's pretty good for the deck. I mean, pretty much every deck runs it as long as the Pokemon's attacks require at least 2 colorless to attack. And this deck also runs 7 psychic energy. So that's pretty much the only energy that I run in this deck. Nothing that special. So nothing that great about it. Okay, so that was the deck. But how does this deck actually pair up, I think, against other decks? And how much does it actually cost? Is it an affordable deck, or is it a very expensive deck? Let's find out. It's pretty important to know how much your deck will cost when you buy it. So here is the cost for my deck. All of these prices come from trollandtoad.com, which is an online retailer, and these are the prices current of June 30th, 2015. For the Pokemon lineup, there's not a huge price. Then again, there's only a few Pokemon in this list, but Wailord EXs are going for $6 a piece, and Gengar EXs are going for $4 a piece, so it is fairly pricey. For the trainer lineup, there isn't anything that expensive. Ends are going for pretty high right now, mainly because the two sets that they're in, Noble Victories and Dark Explorers, are in high demand right now, and there's a very limited amount of cards in those sets to be available to buy. For item cards, Computer Search is very expensive right now at $20, so that is not the only ace spec that could be run in this deck. A Dowsing Machine is a little bit less expensive, I believe around $10. VS Seekers are running at $5 a piece. Ultra Balls are going in really cheap at 50 cents a piece. Muscle Bands are going in very expensive at $4 a piece, as well as Float Stones going in at $2.50. But the big gouge of this deck is the Max Potions. They're charging $7 a piece per Max Potion. It's extremely expensive considering that it's just an uncommon card, but it's in high demand right now. And Verbanks are going fairly high at $5 a piece. For the energy, each double colorless energy is going for around $1 a piece, so not that expensive. This comes in for a total cost of $181. Now this is coming from complete scratch. You wouldn't have any of these cards to equal that high cost of $181. It's also important to know how this deck matches up against other decks. So this deck, when I went to a Pokemon League challenge, it did fairly well against some decks and did horrible against others. So this deck does very well against Night March as long as Wailord can start and buff attack or two from Night March to get Gengar set up, but it does fairly well against Night March. Does good against any Plasma decks because obviously it just shuts off the Deoxys. Genesect it does as well as any Fairy variants because Aromatisse is just shut down. But this deck does struggle in some areas. It does struggle against the Mega Latios Dunk deck as it's able to snipe those Pokemon on the bench like Garbodor and just slow the deck down and really hurt the deck where the heart of the deck is. As well, this deck is also fairly weak to Yveltal just because Gengar is weak to Dark, so that's a big issue too. But overall, I do think this deck has a pretty good chance of doing well at this Nationals tournament. And as always, I will catch you guys later in the next video.